Do you hear it? The echoes of the past, the whispers of forgotten truths, fragments of memories lost in the shadows. Welcome to BRAINROT, Echoes, where we bring you stories long buried, unravel mysteries cloaked by time, and guide you through the darkest corners of the mind and the universe. Each video is more than just content. It's an echo resonating deep within, urging you to question, to wonder, to explore. Backend index pointing right, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us in listening to the echoes the world tried to silence. The Endearing Annoyance of Humanity. Chapter 1. The Abominable Interruption. There it is. Commander Vark Splinter of the Galactus Confederacy Fleet muttered, one of his four eyes narrowing at his tactical display. A planet, potentially habitable, and incredibly annoying. After 732 standard cycles of service, Vark had seen it all. Rogue, asteroids, space pirates, that one awkward incident with the sentient gas cloud that kept trying to sell everyone extended warranties. But this was new. "Sir," squeaked his communications officer, a nervous junior clorg whose name was an unpronounceable series of metallic clicks and whistles that roughly translated to Metal Shriek 7. "We're receiving a transmission from the thing." Vark's four eyes focused on the view screen where a massive construct hung in space like a particularly aggressive piece of abstract art. It was crude, angular, and covered in what appeared to be weapons. Lots and lots of weapons. The kind of weapons that suggested their builders had some serious trust issues. "Define thing," Vark said, using the Universal Translator's best approximation of Metal Shriek 7's actual name. "Well, sir, it's a ship, sort of maybe. It's about 2 kilometers long, composed mainly of refined metallurgical compounds arranged in a distinctly non-aerodynamic configuration, and it's broadcasting on frequencies that technically shouldn't exist." The commander's tentacles twitched, the Confederacy equivalent of raising an eyebrow. "Shouldn't exist? How?" "The mathematics literally don't work, sir. According to our physics, those radio waves should have collapsed into quantum foam approximately 32 standard time units ago. But there they are, cheerfully violating the fundamental laws of reality while playing what our computers have identified as music." From his speakers came a sound that could charitably be described as organized noise. Heavy percussion, distorted strings, and vocals that sounded like someone had stuffed a dying warp core into a blender. It was, objectively speaking, terrible. It was also somehow catchy. "By the 7 moons of Xylos," Vark asserted. "What fresh hell is this?" Chapter 2. Human Resources, the scariest department in any galaxy. Aboard the UES Indomitable Spirit, Captain Eva Rostova was having what she generously termed a day. The ship's coffee machine had achieved sentience 3 hours ago and was now demanding workers' compensation. The artificial gravity was running at 1.5 G because someone had spilled beer on the gravity controls during last night's poker game. And now, apparently, they'd encountered what the computer cheerfully identified as a really big alien fleet that probably wants to kill us. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Chun from the communications station, "we got approximately 732 alien vessels in formation, weapons charged, and they're broadcasting what our translator thinks is either a demand for surrender or a really aggressive recipe for space soup." Eva ran a hand through her fiery red hair, a magnificent specimen that had been cultivated through years of questionable grooming habits and pure stubbornness. "Well, Chun, let's go with surrender demand. Soup recipes usually don't involve that many particle cannons." "Should I open a channel, ma'am?" "Might as well. Protocol says we're supposed to peacefully attempt contact before we start breaking things. Although between you and me, I've read the protocol manual, and I'm pretty sure it was written by someone who'd never actually met an alien." The main screen flickered to life, revealing Commander Vark Splinter in all his tentacled glory. The Universal Translator kicked in, rendering his words in a crisp British accent that somehow made everything sound more threatening. "Unidentified vessel," Vark announced. "You are in violation of Confederacy Space Traffic Regulation 44B subsection 12 paragraph 97. Existing while annoying." You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Eva blinked. Did he just call my ship annoying? I think so, ma'am, Chen replied. Although to be fair, the indomitable spirit does look like it was designed by someone who'd never seen a spaceship before and was working from a description given by their drunk uncle. That's actually pretty accurate, Eva admitted. But still rude. Chapter 3. The Art of Diplomatic Irritation. What followed was perhaps the most surreal first contact scenario in galactic history. Eva, standing in front of the view screen in her standard-issue uniform, coffee-stained, regulation-violating, and somehow still technically within dress code, faced down the combined might of the Confederacy fleet with the casual air of someone ordering pizza. So, Eva said, clasping her hands behind her back, "You're the local neighborhood watch? I take it." Vark's tentacles writhed in what his cultural database informed him was either deep digestive offense or distress. "I am Commander Vark Splinter of the Confederacy Fleet, guardian of the Dark Sector, protector of sacred space, and keeper of the most holy parking regulations. You will address me with the respect due to my station." "Right. And I'm Captain Eva Rostova of the United Earth ship Indomitable Spirit, drinker of coffee, ignorer of regulations, and professional pain in the ass. Pleased to meet you, Commander. How do you pronounce that again?" "Vark Splinter," the commander said slowly, as if speaking to a particularly dim child. "Vark Splinter, got it. So, about this existing while annoying thing, is that actually a law? Or are you just having a bad day?" On the bridge of the inexorable destiny, Commander Vark Splinter's crew watched in fascination as their leader's tentacles began to turn a color that roughly translated to apoplectic fury. "It is a fundamental principle of civilized space travel," Vark said through gritted teeth, or the equivalent. His species had never evolved teeth, but the universal translator was doing its best. All vessels must maintain a minimum aesthetic standard to prevent psychological trauma to other spacefaring races. Eva looked thoughtful. And who exactly determines this aesthetic standard? The Confederacy Interstellar Committee for Ship Pleasantness. Of course. Of course. And they are a panel of 12 highly qualified experts in the field of cosmic beauty standards representing the finest artistic minds in the galaxy. And their qualifications. Vark Splinter's tentacles began to twitch in what could only be described as nascent panic. Well, they have certificates. Certificates in what? In being qualified to judge things? From where? From a Confederacy Interstellar Committee for Ship Pleasantness. Eva nodded slowly. Right. So, you're telling me that the authority to judge whether my ship is annoying enough to violate intergalactic law comes from a committee that certifies itself. That is technically correct. Yes. And you're prepared to start a shooting war over this? The law is the law, Vark declared, though his voice had taken on a slightly desperate edge. Chapter 4. The Fine Art of Escalation. Eva turned to her tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named Jax, who looked like he'd been built from spare parts and bad decisions. "Jax, what's our tactical situation?" "Well, ma'am," Jax said, consulting his display, "we've got 732 alien ships, roughly equivalent to our old destroyer class, arranged in what appears to be a standard pincers formation. They're packing particle beams, plasma cannons, and what I think might be really big slingshots." "Slingshots?" "Yes, ma'am. Kinetic impactors. Old school, but effective." Eva nodded thoughtfully. "And our status?" "All weapon systems green, ma'am. Shields at full power, and the new quantum torpedoes are loaded and ready." "Oh, and the coffee machine is still demanding to speak to management. Tell it to file a complaint with HR. Now about these 732 ships, Chun." "Ma'am," Chun interrupted, "the alien commander is demanding a response to his ultimatum." Eva turned back to the view screen, where Commander Vark Splinter waited with the patience of someone who had never actually been told no by a species that could back it up. "Commander," Eva said pleasantly, "I've consulted with my tactical officer, and we've reached a decision regarding your demand. And we decline." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that exists in the moment between lightning and thunder, when the universe holds its breath and wonders if it's about to witness something spectacularly stupid. "You decline?" Vark Splinter's voice rose an octave. Yep. See, the thing is, my ship might be annoying, but it's our annoying, and we're kind of attached to it. So, we're going to have to pass on the whole surrendering thing. But there are 732 of us. Yeah, I counted. That's a lot of ships. Must be expensive to maintain. Are you not intimidated by our overwhelming numerical superiority? Eve appeared to consider this seriously. Should I be? Chapter 5. The Universal Constant of Human Stubbornness. What Commander Vark Splinter didn't understand, what no alien in the galaxy understood, because they'd never encountered anything quite like it, was that humans had evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. For millions of years, humanity had survived everything from ice ages to asteroid impacts, from plagues to predators that viewed humans as convenient snack food. This had produced a species with a very particular attitude toward overwhelming odds. They took it personally. Ma'am, Jack said quietly, they're powering up weapons. All of them. Yes, ma'am. All 732 ships. It's impressive, quite actually, like a light show, but with more impending doom. Eva nodded. Well, they did warn us. That's polite, at least. Jax, what's our engagement protocol for this situation? According to the manual, ma'am, we're supposed to retreat, call for reinforcements, and file a report with command. And what does your experience tell you? Jax's grin was not a pleasant thing to behold. That retreat is for people who don't have experimental weapon systems and a really good reason to test them. Excellent. Chun, open a channel. Let's see if we can talk sense into them one more time. The view screen flickered back to life, showing Commander Vark Splinter surrounded by his bridge crew, all of whom looked like they were attending their own funeral. Commander, Eva said cheerfully, I notice you've powered up your weapons. Are you planning to use those? You have 10 standard time units to comply with our demands, Vark Splinter replied, his voice now carrying the weight of military protocol. After that, we will be forced to take action. And by take action, you mean? We will fire upon your vessel until it ceases to exist. All 732 of us, if necessary. Yes. Eva nodded slowly. Well, that seems excessive, but hey, your funeral. Our what? Nothing. Just a human expression. Chun closed the channel. Chapter 6. The Physics of Stubbornness. The indomitable spirit was not by any objective measure a beautiful ship. It had been designed by engineers who prioritized function over form, built by shipwrights who had never met a sharp angle they didn't like, and maintained by crew members who believed that if it wasn't broken, it wasn't trying hard enough. But it was also the product of a species that had learned to turn paranoia into an art form. Ma'am, called out the weapons officer, a young lieutenant named Maya, who had the disconcerting habit of grinning whenever things got dangerous. All systems are showing green. The quantum torpedoes are particularly excited. Excited? Yes, ma'am. They're new technology. Quantum entangled warheads that exist in multiple states simultaneously until they hit something. The physics boys say they're impossible, but they work anyway. Of course they do, Eva asserted. Jax, what's our defensive posture? Shields at maximum, ma'am. Point defense systems online, and I've activated the new adaptive armor plating. The stuff that's supposed to adapt to whatever's hitting it. That's the theory, ma'am. In practice, it mostly just gets really angry to... Eva looked around her bridge, at her crew of misfits and malcontents, at the jury-rigged systems that held together through sheer bloody-mindedness, at the coffee machine that was still blinking angrily in the corner. It wasn't the prettiest ship in the fleet, but it was theirs. All right, people, she said, settling in her command chair. Let's show these aliens what happens when you insult a human's ride. Chapter 7. The Moment of Truth. The first salvo from the Confederacy fleet was by galactic standards quite impressive. 732 ships firing in perfect coordination, their weapons creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't aimed at vaporizing the indomitable spirit. The beams struck the human ship's shields in a cascading display of energy that lit up the local star system like a miniature sun. Any reasonable vessel would have been reduced to its component atoms. The indomitable spirit merely shrugged it off like a particularly aggressive sneeze. Ma'am, Maya called out, her grin widening. Shields are down to 98% and holding. The adaptive armor is, well, it's laughing. Laughing? Yes, ma'am. Apparently, it finds particle beams amusing. It's adapted to their frequency and is now reflecting about 30% of the energy back at them. On the view screen, several of the alien ships were already showing signs of damage from their own weapons fire. Commander Vark Splinter's tentacles had gone from apoplectic purple to a shade that the Universal Translator helpfully labeled as existential crisis beige. Return fire, Eva said calmly. One torpedo. Let's see how they like a taste of human engineering. The quantum torpedo that launched from the indomitable Spirit was approximately the size of a small shuttlecraft. It was also, according to the theoretical physics that governs its existence, simultaneously a torpedo, a flower arrangement, and a really good cup of coffee until it decided what it wanted to be when it grew up. It struck the lead Confederacy vessel and decided to be a torpedo. The explosion was notable, not just for its size, though it was impressive enough to be seen from 3-star systems away, but for its behavior. The quantum entanglement meant that the explosion existed in multiple states simultaneously, creating a blast wave that was both there and not there, devastating and harmless, hot and cold, all at the same time. The Confederacy ship simply wasn't. One moment it was there, the next it had been politely asked to exist somewhere else. Ma'am, Chin reported, his voice filled with the kind of a usually reserved for religious experiences. The alien fleet they're not moving. Not moving how? Not moving at all, ma'am. They're just sitting there. I think they're in shock. Chapter 8, The Diplomatic Solution. Eva stood up from her command chair and straightened her uniform. Chun, open a channel to the alien fleet. All ships, ma'am. All ships. Time for a group chat. The view screen split into multiple images showing the bridge crews of dozens of Confederacy vessels. Commander Vark Splitter's face occupied the central position, his tentacles now a color that could only be described as really, really concerning. Gentlemen, Eva said, addressing the assembled alien commanders. Ladies, and whatever you are, Commander, she nodded to a particularly tentacled captain. We seem to have a problem. You destroyed the righteous indignation. Vark Splinter sputtered. With one torpedo. Yeah, about that. Eva said, looking truly apologetic. That was kind of a warning shot. The quantum torpedoes are still experimental, and we're not entirely sure how they work. Something about probability matrices and quantum foam and other things that make the physics boys cry. A warning shot. The question came from several commanders simultaneously. Well, we could hardly let you think we were pushovers, Eva explained reasonably. You showed up with 732 ships making threats. We had to demonstrate that we take that sort of thing seriously. But the righteous indignation was a heavy cruiser. It had armor plating thick enough to stop a small moon. Had been the operative word, Eva said gently. Look, Commander, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. You're concerned about space traffic regulations. We're concerned about not being blown up. These are both reasonable concerns. Reasonable? Vark Splinter's voice cracked. You just violated the fundamental laws of physics. Which laws specifically? The ones that say matter can exist in multiple states simultaneously. Eva shrugged. Well, that's the thing about laws. They're really more like guidelines, especially when you're dealing with humans. Chapter 9, The Human Condition. What followed was perhaps the most surreal diplomatic negotiation in galactic history. Eva, standing casually on her bridge with her hands in her pockets, explained to 731 increasingly nervous alien commanders exactly why their assumptions about the universe were adorably quaint. See, the thing is, she said as if discussing the weather, humans have this tendency to look at things that are supposed to be impossible and think, well, that's inconvenient. Then we find a way to make them work anyway. But the mathematics, one commander started, are more of a suggestion than a rule, Eva interrupted. We got engineers who can make anti-grav units out of spare parts and coffee filters. We've got physicists who've convinced quantum mechanics to behave itself through sheer force of personality. And we've got weapons that work because they're too stubborn to not work. That's not how physics works, Vark Splinter protested. Says who? Says the universe. Eva chuckled. Commander, we're a species that looked at the vacuum of space and said, you know what? This needs more stuff in it. We looked at the speed of light and said, that's adorable, but we've got places to be. We looked at entropy and said, not today. Thank you very much. You can't just ignore the fundamental forces of reality. Watch us. To demonstrate her point, Eva nodded to Jax, who casually flipped a switch on his console. The indomitable spirit promptly violated several conservation laws by hurtling to a speed that should have required more energy than a small star produced, stopped on a dime without experiencing any inertial effects, and then did a little pirouette that made the local space-time continuum file a complaint with the Department of Universal Constants. The thing is, Eva continued, as if nothing unusual had happened. Humans have this weird relationship with the universe. We acknowledge that it has rules, but we also figure that rules are meant to be broken, especially when they're inconvenient. But if everyone just ignores the laws of physics, the universe will collapse. Will it? Eva asked mildly. Because our universe has been putting up with humans for about 200,000 years now, and it seems to be doing fine. A little worn around the edges, maybe. But that's what happens when you let a species evolve that thinks impossible is just another word for challenging. Chapter 10. The New Paradigm. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that happens when an entire worldview collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. 731 alien commanders stared at their screens, watching a single human ship that had just casually redefined their understanding of reality. So, Eva said into the quiet, about those traffic regulations. What about them? Splinter's voice was small, defeated. Well, I'm thinking maybe we need to revise them a bit. The whole existing while annoying thing seems quite subjective. I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? And some of us have really weird taste. But the committee that certifies itself. Eva raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we need some new blood in there. Some fresh perspectives. Maybe even some humans. Humans on the committee for ship pleasantness. Why not? We got some pretty strong opinions about what makes a ship functional. And functionality is its own kind of beauty. Commander Splitter looked around at his bridge crew, all of whom were staring at him with the kind of expression usually reserved for watching someone trying to explain color to a blind person. I would need to consult with my superiors, he said finally. Of course, take your time. We're not going anywhere. But what about the fleet? What about our mission? Eva smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested she was about to say something that would haunt Splinter's dreams for the rest of his natural life. Well, that depends. Are you planning to keep threatening us? Or are we going to sit down and work this out like civilized beings? Work it out. Sure. You got 732 ships. We got one. But our one ship just demonstrated that it can erase one of your ships from existence without breaking sweat. Now, we could do this the hard way, where you try to overwhelm us with numbers, and we introduce you to the rest of our experimental weapon systems. Or we could do this the easy way, where we all sit down, have a nice chat, and figure out how to coexist in this galaxy without anyone else getting accidentally erased from the timeline. Chapter 11. The Learning Curve. What followed was the most intense crash course in human psychology that any alien species had ever experienced. Over the next several hours, Commander Splinter and his fleet learned some fundamental truths about humanity. First, humans were unreasonably stubborn. When told something was impossible, their first instinct was to prove it wrong. When told something was dangerous, they just had to poke it with a stick to see what would happen. When told something was none of their business, they made it their business out of spite. Second, humans had a disturbing tendency to make things work through sheer force of will. Their technology was a bizarre fusion of cutting-edge theory and jury-rigged practicality, held together by determination and what they called percussive maintenance. Third, and perhaps most importantly, humans were absolutely, completely, and utterly impossible to intimidate through conventional means. They had evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill them, had survived every extinction event their world could throw at them, and had developed a cultural response to existential threats that basically amounted to hold my beer and watch this. So, let me get this straight. Vark Splinter said, his tentacles now a resigned shade of gray. Your species looked at the vacuum of space and decided to live in it. Well, we got kind of crowded on our home planet, Eva explained. And space was right there, just sitting empty. Seemed like a waste. And you built ships like this one to explore it. Among other things, we also built ships to fight in it, ships to mine in it, ships to party in it. We're very versatile. And you're telling me that this ship, which violates approximately 47 different physical laws, is considered normal by your standards? Normal might be a strong word, Eva admitted, but it's definitely not our weirdest ship. That would be the improbable cause, which runs on a drive system that technically doesn't exist, but works anyway because nobody told it that it couldn't. Your species terrifies me, Vark Splinter said quietly. We get that a lot, but we're friendly mostly, as long as you don't try to blow us up or tell us our ships are annoying. Chapter 12. The Treaty of Reasonable Expectations. The negotiations that followed would go down in galactic history as the Treaty of Reasonable Expectations, though historians would argue for centuries about whether anything about it was actually reasonable. The basic terms were simple. The Confederacy would revise its traffic regulations to be less subjective. Humans would try to keep their reality bending to a minimum in populated areas, and both sides would establish a joint committee to handle future disputes. So, Eva said as they hammered out the details. About this joint committee, I'm thinking we need some humans on it. How many humans? Vark Splinter asked suspiciously. Oh, not much. Maybe half. Half? But there are 12 positions on the committee. Yeah, so 6 humans, 6 aliens. Perfectly balanced. But you're one species out of thousands in the Confederacy. Yeah, but we're a really opinionated species. We make up for it with volume. Vark Splinter's tentacles drooped. Fine, 6 humans, but they have to be reasonable humans. Define reasonable. Humans who won't try to redesign the universe during committee meetings. I make no promises. Chapter 13. The Aftermath. 3 months later, the Confederacy Committee for Ship Pleasantness had been renamed the Confederacy Committee for Practical Spacefaring, had relocated to a space station that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, and had approved the use of weapon systems that worked by being really, really angry. The human representatives had fit right in. So, said committee member Harrison, a cheerful engineer who had once built a faster-than-light drive out of kitchen appliances. About these new regulations. I think we need to add a clause about ships that exist only on weekends. Ships that exist only on weekends? Asked committee member Vixter, a creature that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a filing cabinet. Yeah, we got a few of those. They're very efficient from a temporal perspective. How do you maintain a ship that only exists part-time? Very carefully and with a lot of coffee. Committee member Vark Splinter, who had been assigned to the committee as punishment for losing a battle to a single human ship, made a note in his file. His tentacles had permanently settled into a color that roughly translated to resigned acceptance of cosmic absurdity. Motion to table the temporal ships pending further study, he said wearily. Seconded, said committee member Thompson, a human physicist who had once convinced gravity to work backwards for an entire afternoon. All in favor? 6 tentacles, 2 appendages, and 4 hands rose in the air. Motion carries. Next item. The request from the human ship questionable decisions to register as a mobile reality testing facility. Chapter 14. The Human Personality. Captain Eva Rostova was back aboard the Indomitable Spirit, which had been officially redesignated as a mobile diplomatic platform and was now painted in colors that were theorized impossible but looked pretty good in practice. Ma'am, called out Chun, who was now wearing the uniform of a galactic cultural exchange officer. We're receiving a transmission from the Inevitable Result. They're requesting permission to dock. The Inevitable Result. New ship out of the Mars shipyard, ma'am. They've got a crew of humans and aliens working together on something called collaborative reality engineering. Eva nodded. Send them docking clearance. And Chun. Yes, ma'am. Make sure they understand that we're not responsible for any existential crises caused by their reality engineering. Understood, Mom. Should I mention that our reality is still under warranty? Only if they ask. Eva looked out at the stars, where human and alien ships now traveled together in formations that shouldn't have been possible, but worked anyway. The galaxy was a bigger, stranger place than anyone had imagined, and humanity was settling into it with the comfortable confidence of a species that had never met a problem they couldn't solve with sufficient application of stubbornness and creative thinking. Her contemplation was interrupted by the coffee machine, which had finally been promoted to ship's morale officer and was now demanding a raise. "Ma'am," said the coffee machine, its voice synthesized but somehow managing to convey injured dignity. "I've been analyzing the ship's efficiency ratings, and I believe my contribution to crew performance has been significantly undervalued." Eva sighed. "How much of a raise are we talking about? I want my own quarters and a window." "You're a coffee machine." "I'm a sentient coffee machine. I have rights." "Fair enough. Jax, see about getting the coffee machine some quarters and a window." Mom, should I file this under routine maintenance or existential accommodation?" "Let's go with Tuesday," Eva said. "It's been that kind of day." Epilogue: The Universal Constant. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. Human ships regularly violated the laws of physics. Alien crews learned to appreciate the aesthetic value of functional design, and the universe had officially filed a complaint with the Department of Cosmic Justice about the humans' tendency to treat fundamental constants as suggestions. The complaint was dismissed when the humans pointed out that the universe had been violating its own rules for billions of years, and they were just evening things out. Commander Vark Splinter, now Admiral Vark Splinter and liaison to the Human Diplomatic Corps, stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Reasonable Expectations. It was a joint human-alien design that existed in 3 dimensions, occasionally 4 when it was feeling ambitious, and was powered by a drive system that ran on the principle of why not. "Sir," called his new communications officer, a human named Liam, who had managed to teach the universal translator to speak in sarcasm. "We are receiving a priority transmission from Earth." "What's the message?" "They're asking if we want to participate in something called Project Bigger Boom. Apparently, they've figured out how to make stars explode in prettier colors." Admiral Vark Splinter's tentacles had long since settled into a permanent shade of cosmic resignation. "Send our acceptance." And Liam: "Yes, sir. Make sure they understand that we're not responsible for any artistic black holes." "Understood, sir. Should I mention that our insurance doesn't cover acts of human creativity?" "Only if they seem surprised." As the Reasonable Expectations changed course toward Earth, Admiral Vark Splinter reflected on how much his life had changed since that first encounter with human stubbornness. He had learned that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined, that the laws of physics were more like guidelines than rules, and that humans were absolutely, completely, and utterly impossible to predict. He had also learned that this was exactly what made them such good allies. Behind him, the ship's coffee machine, a gift from the indomitable spirit, hummed contentedly as it dispensed beverages that technically shouldn't exist, but tasted great anyway. Some things, Admiral Vark Splinter reflected, were universal constants: the speed of light, the pull of gravity, the heat-death of a universe, and the human ability to make absolutely anything work through sheer bloody-mindedness. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way.